Well, I have no connection with any other people who have been making inquiries, said Holmes carelessly. If you won't tell us, the bet is off, that is all. But I'm always ready to back my opinion on a matter of fowls. And I have a fiver on it that the bird I ate is country bred. Well, then, you have lost your fiver, for it's town bred, snapped the salesman. It's nothing of the kind. I say it is. I don't believe it. Do you think you know more about fowls than I, who have handled them ever since I was a nipper? I tell you, all those perks that went to the Alpha were town bred. You will never persuade me to believe that. Will you bet, then? It's merely taking your money, for I know that I am right. But I will have a sovereign on with you, just to teach you not to be obstinate. The salesman chuckled grimly. Bring me the books, Bill, said he. The small boy brought around a small thin volume and a great greasy bagged one, laying them out together beneath the hanging lamp. Now then, Mr. Cocksure, said the salesman, I thought that I was out of geese, but before I finish you'll find that there is still one left in my shop. You see this little book? Well, that's the list of the folk from whom I buy. Do you see? Well, then, here on this page are the country folk, and the numbers after their names are where their accounts are in the big ledger. Now then, you see this other page in red ink? Well, that is a list of my own town suppliers. Now, look at that third name, just read it out to me. Mrs. Oakshott, 117, Brixton Road, 249, Red Holmes. Quite so. Now turn that up in the ledger. Holmes turned to the page indicated. Here you are. Mrs. Oakshott, 117, Brixton Road, Egging Poultry Supplier. Now, then, what's the last entry? December 22nd. 24 geese X7S60. Quite so, there you are, and underneath, sold to Mr. Windigate of the Alpha at 125. What have you to say now? Sherlock Holmes looked deeply chagrined. He drew a sovereign from his pocket and threw it down upon the slab, turning away with the air of a man whose disgust is too deep for words. A few yards off, he stopped under a lamp-post and laughed in the hearty, noiseless fashion which was peculiar to him. When you see a man with whiskers of that cut and the pink unprotruding out of his pocket, you can always draw him by a bet, said he. I dare say that if I had put £100 down in front of him, that man would not have given me such complete information as was drawn from him by the idea that he was throwing me on a wager. Well, Watson, we are, I fancy, nearing the end of our quest, and the only point which remains to be determined is whether we should go on to this Mrs. Oxshott tonight, or whether we should reserve it for tomorrow. It is clear from what that surly fellow said that there are others besides ourselves who are anxious about the matter, and I should. His remarks were suddenly cut short by a loud hubbub which broke out from the stall which we had just left. Turning round, we saw a little rat-faced fellow standing in the centre of the circle of yellow light which was thrown by the swinging lamp, while Breckenridge, the salesman, framed in the door of the stall, was shaking his fist fiercely at the cringing figure. I have had enough of you and your geese, he shouted. I wish you were all like the devil together. If you come pestering me any more with your silly talk, I'll sack the dog at you. You bring Mrs. Oxshott here and I will answer her. But what have you to do with it? Did I buy the geese off you? No, but one of them was mine all the same, whined the little man. Well then, ask Mrs. Oxshott for it. She told me to ask you. Well, you can ask the King of Prussia for all I care. I have had enough of it. Get out of this. He rushed fiercely forward, and the inquirer flitted away into the darkness. Ha! This may save us a visit to Brixton Road, whispered Holmes. Come with me, and we will see what is to be made of this fellow. Striding through the scattered knots of people who lounged round the flaring stalls, my companion speedily overtook the little man and touched him upon the shoulder. He sprang round, and I could see in the gaslight that every vestige of colour had been driven from his face. Who are you, then? What do you want? He asked in a quavering voice. "You will excuse me," said Holmes blindly, "but I could not help overhearing the questions which you put to the salesman just now. I think that I could be of assistance to you. You, who are you? How could you know anything of the matter?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know." "But you can know nothing of this." "Excuse me, you are endeavoring to trace some keys which were sold by Mrs. Oxshott of Brixton Road to a salesman named Breckenridge, by him in turn to Mr. Windigate of the Alpha, and by him to his club, of which Mr. Henry Baker is a member." "Oh, sir, you are the very man whom I have longed to meet," cried the little fellow with outstretched hands and quivering fingers. "I can hardly explain to you how interested I am in this matter." Sherlock Holmes hailed a four-wheeler which was passing. "In that case, we had better discuss it in a cozy room, rather than in this wind-swept marketplace," said he. "But pray tell me before we go further, who it is that I have the pleasure of assisting." The man hesitated for an instant. "My name is John Robinson," he answered with a sidelong glance. "No, no, the real name," said Holmes sweetly. "It is always awkward doing business with an alias." A flush sprang to the white cheeks of the stranger. "Well then," said he, "my real name is James Ryder." "Precisely so, head attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. Pray step into the cab and I shall soon be able to tell you everything which you would wish to know." The little man stood glancing from one to the other of us with half frightened, half hopeful eyes, as one who is not sure whether he is on the verge of a windfall or of a catastrophe. Then he stepped into the cab, and in half an hour we were back in the sitting room at Baker Street. Nothing had been said during our drive, but the high, thin breathing of our new companion, and the claspings and unclaspings of his hands, spoke of the nervous tension within him. "Here we are," said Holmes cheerily as we filed into the room. "The fire looks very seasonable in this weather. You look cold, Mr. Ryder. Pray take the basket chair. I will just put on my slippers before we settle this little matter of yours. Now then, you want to know what became of those keys?" "Yes, sir. Or rather, I fancy, of that goose. It was one bird, I imagine, in which you were interested, white, with a black bar across the tail." Ryder quivered with emotion. "Oh, sir," he cried, "can you tell me where it went to?" "It came here." "Here? Yes, and a most remarkable bird it proved." "I don't wonder that you should be taking an interest in it." "It laid an egg after it was dead, the boniest, brightest little blue egg that ever was seen. I have it here in my museum." Our visitor staggered to his feet and clutched the mantelpiece with his right hand. Holmes unlocked his strong box and held up the blue carbuncle, which shone out like a star, with a cold, brilliant, many-pointed radiance. Ryder stood glaring with a drawn face, uncertain whether to claim or to disown it. "The game's up, Ryder," said Holmes quietly. "Hold up, man, or you will be into the fire. Give him an arm back into his chair, Watson. He's not good blood enough to go in for felony with impunity. Give him a dash of brandy. So, now he looks a little more human. What a shrimp it is, to be sure." For a moment he had staggered and nearly fallen, but the brandy brought a tinge of colour into his cheeks, and he sat staring with frightened eyes at his accuser. "I have almost every link in my hand, and all the proofs which I could possibly need. So there is little which you need tell me. Still, that little may as well be cleared up to make the case complete. You had heard, Ryder, of this blue stone of the Countess of Morcar's?" "It was Catherine Cusack who told me of it," said he in a crackling voice. "I see. Her ladyship's waiting maid. Well, the temptation of sudden wealth so easily acquired was too much for you, as it has been for better men before you. But you were not very scrupulous in the means you used. It seems to me, Ryder, that there is the making of a very pretty villain in you. You knew that this man Horner, the plumber, had been concerned in some matter before, and that suspicion would rest the more readily upon him. What did you do then? You made some small job in my lady's room, you and your confederate Cusack, and you managed that he should be the man sent for. Then, when he had left, you rifled the jewel case, raised the alarm, and had this unfortunate man arrested. You then—" Ryder threw himself down suddenly upon the rag and clutched at my companion's knees. "For God's sake, have mercy," he shrieked. "Think of my father, of my mother, it would break their hearts. I never went wrong before. I will never again. I swear it. I swear it on a Bible. Oh, don't bring it into court. For Christ's sake, don't. Get back into your chair, said Holmes sternly. It is very well to cringe and crawl now. But you thought little enough of this poor Horner in the dock of a crime of which he knew nothing. I will try, Mr. Holmes. I will leave the country, sir. Then the charge against him will break down. We will talk about that. And now let us hear a true account of the next act. How came the stone into the goose? And who came the goose into the open market? Tell us the truth, for there lies your only hope of safety.